Good evening, and right before we dive in, I'd like to quickly mention that over on Epoch TV, our awesome no censorship video platform, I published a super spicy episode of Facts Matter exposing how, unbeknownst to most Americans, there are literally thousands of food items on our supermarket store shelves that contain ingredients that were made using nanotechnology. It's also found in certain pharmaceutical products that I'm not allowed to mention here on YouTube. If you'd like to check out that awesome episode, the link will be right there at the very top of the description box. I hope you click on it and check it out. Now, getting back to today's topic, well, there was just a bombshell release from the House Judiciary Committee. It turns out that the man behind the scenes, the man who orchestrated the U.S. intelligence letter, which brushed away the Hunter Biden scandal as Russian disinformation, it was none other than our very own Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. You heard that right. The man behind the infamous letter, which was subsequently signed by 51 current and former intelligence officials, claiming that the whole Hunter Biden story had all the earmarks of Russian disinformation, was none other than our very own trusty Secretary of State. And I should mention that this is not hyperbole, this is not conjecture, and this is not just an educated guess. This information came from the very top, from the former Deputy Director of the CIA, Mr. Michael Morell. He was interviewed by the House Judiciary Committee, and he revealed to them how the letter came to be, as well as the true intentions behind why it was written in the first place. And before I read to you his testimony, I should mention that if you appreciate content like this, I do hope you take a quick moment to smash those like and subscribe buttons, which quite literally forces the YouTube algorithm to share this video out to ever more people, letting the truth be known far and wide. Now, here is what the testimony of the former Deputy Director of the CIA revealed regarding that letter. Quote, in his transcribed interview, Morell testified that on or around October 17th of 2020, Antony Blinken reached out to him to discuss the Hunter Biden laptop story. Blinken, at the time, was a senior advisor to the Biden campaign. According to Morell, although Blinken's outreach was couched as simply gathering Morell's reaction to the New York Post story, it set in motion the events that led to the issuance of the public statement. Morell testified that the Biden campaign helped to strategize about the public release of the statement, meaning, in plain English, that Antony Blinken played a role in the inception of this letter as well as providing the impetus for its creation in the first place. Essentially, without Antony Blinken and his input, there would have been no letter. But it gets even wilder, because this former CIA deputy director, he went on to pretty much give the entire game away by explaining why he went along with Antony Blinken in the first place in drafting the letter. Here's what he writes, quote, Morell further explained that one of his two goals in releasing the statement was to help then Vice President Biden in the debate and to assist him in winning the election. Morell testified there were two intents. One intent was to share our concern with the American people that the Russians were playing on this issue. And two, it was to help Vice President Biden. Morell was asked why he wanted to help Biden. His answer, because I wanted him to win the election. I mean, listen, this is just my opinion, but this goes way beyond partisan politics. These are actual U.S. intelligence officials using their vaulted credentials to spread actual disinformation at the behest of a political campaign in order to get the guy that they want elected, which sounds bad enough. However, when you put things into chronological order, if you put them on a timeline, it gets even worse. Essentially, what happened was that on October 14th of 2020, just weeks before the presidential election, the New York Post, which is America's oldest newspaper, they began publishing a series of articles detailing the Biden family's business dealings in foreign countries, like Ukraine and China. Now, most of the details in those stories came from emails that were inside of Hunter Biden's infamous laptop, which he dropped off at a computer repair shop and then never picked up. And when those stories first dropped, well, I remember that they were like a nuclear explosion on the political stage. With less than a month before the election, those stories had the real potential to actually swing the results. But as we all know, the censorship regime jumped into action almost immediately. Within a few days, the New York Post article was banned by Twitter because supposedly it violated their policy on hacked materials. Although with the release of the Twitter files by Elon Musk, we now know that it was a campaign of pure censorship. Regardless of how it actually transpired and happened, well, leading up to the election, not only were you not allowed to share the article, but the New York Post itself was locked out of their own Twitter account and unable to post anything. Then you had Facebook, which likewise throttled the sharing of the article using their algorithm so that effectively no one could see it on their platform either. But that wasn't good enough. Censoring the story was only step one. The next step was to discredit the story entirely by labeling it as Russian disinformation. However, the only problem was that there was no actual evidence of it being Russian disinformation. But that didn't really seem to matter, because as we learned from this letter from the House Judiciary Committee, well, on October 17th, Mr. Anthony Blinken, seemingly in crisis mode, reached out to the former acting director of the CIA, Mr. Michael Morrell. Blinken then provided the impetus and got the ball rolling on the letter, which would then be used to discredit the entirety of the Hunter Biden incriminating email story. And funny enough, by the way, on the very same day that Anthony Blinken reached out to this former CIA director, well, you had Congressman Adam Schiff, who at that time, I should mention, was the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He went on CNN and he said this.
Well, we know that this whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin. That's been clear for well over a year now, that they've been pushing this false narrative about the vice president and his son.
And wouldn't you know it, just 2 short days after that CNN interview, the infamous letter was published, signed by 51 current and former U.S. intelligence officials, claiming that the Hunter Biden email story had all the, quote, classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. That letter was then used by almost all of the legacy news outlets in our country to not only discredit the entire Biden family corruption scandal, but also to justify why they were ignoring it. For instance, Ms. Natasha Bertrand, who was working for Politico at the time, although now she works for CNN, she published an article on October 19th titled, quote, Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinformation, dozens of former intel officials say. And you saw the same narrative being pushed out on almost every other media outlet in the country, whether it was CNN, NBC News, PBS, Huffington Post, The Intercept, Mother Jones, and so on and so forth. Joe Biden himself even used the letter as his defense during the live debate with President Trump just days before the actual election. Take a listen.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what.
Is this where you're going? This is where he's going.
However, the story actually gets a lot deeper than that, which we'll get into right after I introduce the sponsor of today's episode, which is the company that sold me this beautiful coin. This right here is an American Walking Liberty 1-ounce gold coin. And typically, I order at least one of these from our sponsor, American Hartford Gold, every single month. The reason I do so is because, as you likely know, the inflation rate in this country is the highest that has been in, the last 40 years now. Everything like the price of food, the price of housing, the price of gas is absolutely going through the roof. And in fact, market experts like the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, he's not only predicting a recession, but he's even using words like unprecedented economic hurricane. And so listen, I absolutely do not give you any financial advice, but I would recommend that you do what I do, which is pick up the phone and call American Hartford Gold. Their super friendly staff can help you diversify your portfolio by either getting physical gold and physical silver delivered directly to your doorstep like I do, or deposited directly into your IRA and your 401k accounts. They make the entire process super simple. And actually, besides me, they have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau with quite literally thousands of satisfied clients around the country. And best of all, to our viewers, to the viewers of Facts Matter, they are currently throwing in $2,500 worth of free silver on your first qualifying order. So giving them a call is an absolute no-brainer. So pick up the phone and call 866-242-2352. That's 866-242-2352. Or text Roman to 65532. Their link will also be down in the description box below. And now let's head on back to the studio. And now we know that response from Joe Biden on the national stage was brought to you and me by Mr. Anthony Blinken, who was then given the position of Secretary of State. That is, if nothing else, amazing. And it was especially amazing to the people within the Trump administration who actually had access to all the high-level top-secret information. For instance, Mr. John Radcliffe, who was the Trump administration's Director of National Intelligence, well, here's what he said about what was taking place in regards to this letter from his perspective at the very top of the intelligence food chain.
When you really look at the details of what they tried to do and his testimony, as you correctly pointed out, Martha, I had already addressed this story publicly. Adam Schiff had come out a few days before and had said that the Biden laptop was part of a smear campaign from the Kremlin. So I went on national TV to say that's not true. The only intelligence Adam Schiff has is the intelligence that I've shared with him, and the intelligence community doesn't have any that indicates this is a Russian disinformation campaign. What I didn't say then, Martha, because I didn't want to prejudice Hunter Biden's rights as a citizen, was I knew that the FBI had the laptop, and I knew that there was an investigation at the Department of Justice. So the problem for Mike Morrell and the admission that he just made is that I made those statements on this network publicly and put out a statement 14 hours before the letter that he orchestrated was published in Politico. So at the time that it was published, he knew, Anthony Blinken knew, Politico knew, the Biden administration, they all knew that the intelligence community had officially stated that this was not Russian disinformation, but they did it anyway. They obviously did it as an effort not just to win the election, but to mislead voters about the truth. They suppressed the truth and they amplified a lie. And I think what's extraordinary about this, Martha, is that, think about it. It's the former acting head of the CIA working with and orchestrating a hoax, another hoax, with the sitting Secretary of State to mislead the American people, to influence the election improperly. And I just think, it's just outrageous.
However, the problem for Mr. Anthony Blinken became a bit more serious when yesterday you had Senator Ron Johnson speaking over on Fox News, and he revealed the fact that Mr. Blinken had actually lied to Congress regarding his connection to Hunter Biden while he was being interviewed for the position of Secretary of State. Here's Senator Johnson explaining the situation.
Proclaim their innocence. What is interesting, Marie, and here's a little news for you. Anthony Blinken finally did come in and sit down for a voluntary transcribed interview in December of 2020 because he wanted to be Secretary of State. And now because of more information that's come out, we know that he lied bold-faced to Congress about never emailing Hunter Biden. My guess is he told a bunch of other lies that hopefully we'll be able to bring him and his wife back in, tell them to preserve their records.
Now, what Senator Johnson was referring to in that clip appears to be a decades-long relationship between Hunter Biden and Anthony Blinken. You see, according to recently uncovered emails, Hunter Biden emailed Anthony Blinken's wife all the way back in the year 2010 asking for her husband's private email address. The three of them also made plans to get coffee together afterward. Then, from that encounter in 2010, it appears that the men continued to stay in touch. For instance, the emails show that in 2015, at a time when Mr. Blinken was Barack Obama's Deputy Secretary of State and Hunter Biden was on the board of a Ukrainian energy company, well, the two were exchanging communications. The emails show that Hunter Biden was trying to meet with Mr. Blinken in order to get his quote-unquote advice on things. And it should be noted that Blinken was conducting this back-and-forth email correspondence with Hunter entirely using his private AOL email account, rather than his official account with the State Department. And so, the fact that he allegedly told Congress that he had never emailed Hunter Biden, in light of this new email exchange, well, it does appear to be a lie. And as such, Senator Johnson has begun to call other fellow senators to issue subpoenas against both Mr. Blinken himself as well as his wife in order to force them to testify under oath. Now, at first, when all these revelations began coming to light, the State Department refused to issue any sort of a comment. However, with all these facts piling up, one on top of the other, it was inevitable that Mr. Blinken would have to issue some kind of a public statement one way or the other. And indeed, while sitting for an interview with Fox News just earlier tonight, well, here's what Mr. Blinken said.
Well, first, one of the great benefits of this job is that I don't do politics and don't engage in it. But with regard to that letter, I didn't, wasn't my idea, didn't ask for it, didn't solicit it, and I think the testimony that the former Deputy Director of the CIA, Mike Morrell, put forward confirms that.
And so whether any accountability will actually be had here is, well, a question that, quite frankly, only time will tell. At the moment, the House Judiciary Committee sent over a list of questions to Mr. Anthony Blinken regarding this matter with a deadline of May 4th for him to answer, which is this upcoming Thursday. And if he refuses to answer, perhaps he will be subpoenaed to appear before Congress to once again answer questions regarding both his commissioning of that letter during the 2020 election, as well as his potentially lying to Congress regarding his alleged relationship with Mr. Hunter Biden. If you'd like to go deeper into anything that we discussed in today's episode, I'll throw all of my research notes down into the description box below this video so you can peruse them at your own leisure. And then lastly, as I mentioned at the top of the episode as well, over on Epoch TV, I published a super spicy episode of Facts Matter exposing how, unbeknownst to pretty much all Americans, there are thousands of food items on our supermarket store shelves that contain ingredients that were made using nanotechnology. Also, some pharmaceutical products contain these ingredients as well. And the reason that we don't know about these is because for over the past 20 years now, the FDA has actually not required companies to list these nanoparticle ingredients on their ingredients label, even though there are no long-term studies regarding their effects to our health. If you'd like to check out that awesome episode in its entirety, the link will be right there at the very top of the description box. All you have to do is click on that link, and you can go and watch that episode over on Epoch TV, our awesome no censorship video platform, right away. Hope you check it out. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed. Most importantly, stay free.